Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video. We're going to do the GWV Sunday Round-Up, having a look at various things for this Sunday afternoon. So have a look at solar activity, we'll have a look at what's happening in terms of snow cover across Siberia, and a bit of things well, Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, and weather for the next week, 10 days. It looks like things are going to be turning much more unsettled in the next few days. It could well be that the prolonged dry spell that we've been in for several months actually, could be coming to an end. We haven't really had a wetter than average month since June nationwide. It may be that May is going to shape up to be a wetter month than we've had for quite a long time. I'll talk you through everything that's going on in a second. Just to say that today's first video was the fourth summer analogues update. So you can find that video here on the homepage. Just scroll down a little bit and suddenly the link, as later on that will be placed on the summer updates and forecast page. Be a written post that goes with that. That'll be this evening. And also later today, Terry Scully will be issuing his final thoughts for the summer as well. So you'll be able to see what Terry is predicting for this summer. Also, busy day at GWV. Right, let's get on with the video then. And we're going to start off with solar activity. This is the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net. We're completely spotless. This is a sunspot to be seen, and if you have a look at the GWV solar tracker, which has just been updated by our good friend James Ackrill, we can see that yes, we are actually having quite a run of spotless days now. I think it's been about 5 or 6 days of completely spotless conditions on the sun, on our side of the sun. So this is tracking solar activity going right way back to the summer. We can go back over there with the tracker, and you can see that generally the trend has been downwards. The trend lines, the thick green line and the thick red line, were up there back last summer. You can see that yes, they've been trending downwards overall, although not a linear process, occasionally been moving back upwards. But the overall trend is down. We're going down into solar minimum. Obviously, I've been explaining this, of course, in the updates recently. So, solar minimum will be occurring around 18 months from now, when we'll have several months of no sunspots at all, or virtually no sunspots at all. And we are moving down into that particular period at the moment. This is where we are right now. You see we are having a run of the spotless days. So we will get more sunspots in the coming weeks and months as the trend gradually moves downwards. The last time we had a long run of spotless days was back in March, so it's been a little while coming, and of course we can expect to have more of these days without any sunspots on the solar disk over the next few weeks, and particularly the next few months. We look at sunspot activity, solar activity, because there is a connection between low levels of sunspots and an increased risk of northern blocking, particularly in summer, and particularly in the Atlantic and Europe region of the Arctic. And if you get northern blocking in winter, that's the route to getting cold weather. So if you like low levels of solar activity, low sunspot numbers, and solar minimum can be associated with an increased risk for the UK and Europe of colder winters. We'll continue to monitor solar activity, and next week we're actually going to do Solar Sunday. We haven't done Solar Sunday since February, beginning of February, so we are due for one. We'll be bringing you up to date with everything that's going on with the sun in more detail next Sunday at GWV. Right, on to snow cover. This is how things are looking, or this is how things was looking this time last week across Russia and Scandinavia in terms of snow cover. We had quite a lot of snow cover this time last week across Siberia, Scandinavia. Of course, eventually, in the next month or so, all of this is going to fall away. But it's a slow old process this year to get this to fall, particularly across Scandinavia, where we have got more snow cover than you would expect. That's the latest. And really, there's been very little thawing taking place of the snow across particularly Scandinavia. Scandinavia northern Scandinavia, anyway, it's not down in the south, of course. In the populated region in the south, there's not much. But in the north, yes, I've got quite a lot of snow cover still hanging on there across Scandinavia, northern Scandinavia, and into northern parts of Russia as well. So the past week, been very little melting of the snow. It will go eventually across the whole of Scandinavia and Russia as get through towards the summer. But it is a little bit delayed this year in getting this snow cover to melt. We'll keep an eye on that. In terms of the oceans, very little development in either the Atlantic or the Pacific. So we're still struggling really to get this El Nino going. That's just there. No real signs that we've strengthened the sea surface temperature anomalies, or the positive sea surface temperature anomalies in the ENSO region over the past week or so. We've got Peru over there, Indonesia there, of course, and when we get the warm water rising up to the top of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, that is the signature of El Nino. Yes, it's a little bit warmer than average, but this is still really compared to what's happening earlier in the year. Around January, February, we saw very marked and increased warming occurring through the equatorial Pacific Ocean. Over the past couple of months, that has stalled quite a lot. I think the modelling is still going more or less towards an El Nino event in the second half of the year, but I think we're going to struggle to get a Super Nino this time compared to what we had 2015-16. And the reason is that the north, or one of the reasons, is that the northern Pacific is quite a lot colder. So going north, we see there is pretty extensive cooler than average sea surface temperature anomalies in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. When the northern Pacific is cold like that, it tends to we tend to struggle to really get the El Nino going. So I suspect we probably will have an El Nino event. Probably will be a fairly weak one. Famous last words. Over in the Atlantic, a real north-south split. Northern parts of the Atlantic looking quite cold, but southern parts of the Atlantic, or tropical Atlantic, looking really quite warm. So we've got strengthening warm sea surface, warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies here through the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean. This tends to be the breeding ground for hurricanes in the summer off the coast of Africa. So if these warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies continue here, I wouldn't be surprised if we have quite a few hurricanes through the course of this summer and tropical storms. Now, one thing that tends to go against that is an El Nino, because when you have a developing El Nino summer, you tend to lower the risk of hurricane activity in the Atlantic. But those are pretty warm sea surface temperature anomalies that we see there off the coast of Africa in the tropical Atlantic, and I won't be all that surprised if we don't get quite a few storms developing as we get through into the summer. Looking at the Arctic oscillation next, so we've been trending negative with the Arctic oscillation over the past few weeks. This is the observed and forecast chart from NOAA and NCEP for the Arctic oscillation. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Pole. It isn't driving anything, it just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. So going back into the winter, we had a prolonged run of positivity of the Arctic oscillation, which is one of the reasons we had a mild winter, because we kept all the cold air bottled up in the Arctic and we strengthened the westerlies coming across the Atlantic. Since around the middle part of April, this period just here, we've been trending downwards with the Arctic oscillation. We have gone through a period of negativity, and particularly bottoming out there about a week ago with quite strongly negative Arctic oscillation condition. That tells us we have blocking, or we've got blocking over the pole, and that's a reason things have turned quite a lot cooler. Since we had a warm start to April, the temperature's generally been trending much closer to average, and that's one of the reasons why, because we've been seeing blocking up over the Arctic, which of course forces out cold air down into mid-latitudes. Now, the forecast part of this is to begin to lift the Arctic Oscillation back up. So we are seeing a movement back to neutral, really. I'll be a bit dubious about saying we're going back into positive Arctic Oscillation condition yet, but it does look as though we're going to see this blocking beginning to ease as we go through to the second half of May. This period just here gradually lifts the GFS ensembles are gradually lifting the Arctic Oscillation back towards neutral, maybe going slightly positive. So it looks like we're going to see the blocking signal starting to relax a little bit as we go through into the second half of the month. North Atlantic Oscillation is very similar. Again, this is observed and forecast. The black line tells us where we've been. Red line's at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the North Atlantic Oscillation to go. So again, through the winter, mostly positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation. Then we have this switch through April going negative with the NAO at the same time as the AO was going negative. We bottom out just there through the early part of May, and then the forecast part is to gradually lift the NAO back up, again only going back towards neutral, not going particularly positive at this stage, but again I think it is a signal that the blocking pattern that we've had over the pole and over Greenland in the past few weeks is going to begin to ease off as we go through into the second half of May. Now these indexes, the NAO and the AO, they tend to move in blocks of 3 or 4 months. So we've only had around a month, perhaps a little bit more, of negativity of the AO and the NAO. It would be quite quick to start to move this back into positive territory. So that's why I'm saying I think we'll probably only go back to neutral. And then I wouldn't be all that surprised, actually, if we saw blocking re-establishing. We go negative again for a little while. So we might not be done with the blocking signal just yet. We'll keep an eye on the AO and the NAO, of course. This is the GFS temperature and precipitation ensemble chart for the next 2 weeks, dealing with temperatures first of all. So the upper air temperatures are just here. Red line is the 30-year upper air temperature average. We're going to have a warm start to the week. So around Tuesday, we might get temperatures up to around 24, 25 degrees in the far southeast. That's upper 70s Fahrenheit, depending on how much sunshine we get. It doesn't last all that long. It's a couple of days, wonder, and then we're just going back to average. So the temperatures cool off in the second half of the week, and the upper air temperatures, anyway, are around average. Actually, down on the surface, that could be a little bit cooler than average, depending on how much sunshine we have. The real change is precipitation. So you'll notice all these spikes on the bottom of the chart. It looks as though all of a sudden, this has crept up on us. It wasn't really being signaled around a week ago, but all of a sudden, it looks like we are now moving into a much more unsettled period. So especially from around the middle of the week onwards, it looks like we're trending with the GFS ensembles really quite unsettled indeed. And this is the ensemble chart for London, which is one of the drier places. So it looks like we've got quite a bit of rainfall coming up over the next week or so. Temperature anomalies are looking like that for the next week. This takes us from the 14th through 22nd of May. Around average, maybe for the south, a little bit on the cooler than average side. For the north, just around normal, really. Notice those cold temperature anomalies that we had over Scandinavia, Western Russia, earlier in the month are gradually being pushed backwards now. So even southern Scandinavia is beginning to go a little bit milder than average. We should start to see that snow cover beginning to melt away, I think, over the next week or two across Scandinavia. Now that looks very different compared to what we've seen for a long time. That's a precipitation anomaly for the next week, again going from the 14th to 22nd of May, and it looks really quite significantly wetter than average now, and particularly focusing on southern and southeastern parts of the country. That's mainly down to what could be a real deluge on Wednesday. But it does look as though we're trending significantly more unsettled in the week ahead. This is how the GFS is seeing things for Wednesday. We've got low pressure up to the north. There's high pressure over central parts of Europe, and we're still in quite a warm air mass in the south. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what happens is that we get a wave developing on a weather front. So if I just highlight where the weather front is on this chart on Wednesday, the weather front is just there. So it's kind of clearing the country at midnight on Wednesday. But by the time we go through to midnight on Thursday, a wave has developed on that front, and it's formed an area of low pressure, which at midnight on Thursday is sitting off the East Anglian coast. Now, that could produce a real deluge for southern, southeastern parts of the country. So this is the precipitation forecast for GFS for Wednesday. There's the weather front, and at that time, it's actually looking quite weak. It's lying in that sort of position there. That then starts to pep up as we go through into Wednesday morning. So the precipitation begins to turn a little bit heavier, and notice this area of really very wet weather down towards the Bay of Biscay. Again, that's along that weather front, and there's a wave that's forming an area of low pressure along the front. So through the course of Wednesday, the rain gathers to the south and it pushes northwards. So by the end of Wednesday, this is 6 o'clock in the evening, it's very, very wet indeed across England and Wales. That could well be an inch of rain falling there widely across England and Wales. It's been a long time. Probably have to go back to June to find a day that's as wet as that. So it's been a long time coming, but it looks like we could have a really wet spell down across the south of the country. Now, what could go wrong with this, if you're waiting for rain, what could go wrong is that the front might be lying through central France when we get to Wednesday, and the wave could run up that sort of direction and just miss us. But as it stands, it looks as though we could have a very wet day down in the south on Wednesday, and then that rain clears away into the North Sea as we go through into Thursday, with that area of low pressure clearing into the North Sea. After that, we're left in a cool and showery scenario as we go through into next weekend. Low pressure is close to the country, sinking down across the country, so we're within a cool air mass, and it looks really quite showery as well. We keep things unsettling to the extended part of this morning's GFS run as well. Low pressure, that's quite interesting. We've got low pressure on Sunday, a week away, sitting across western parts of Germany and the Low Countries. Look where that goes as we go through into Monday. It heads on towards the east coast of the country. That could bring more very wet weather down the eastern side with a cold northerly wind as well. These charts are much more unsettled than anything we've seen for a really long time. And as we run up to day 10, that low pressure just sits close to the East Anglian coast, probably keeping more rain going down the east coast. To elsewhere, it will be a case of showers. GWV, there's that low pressure that's there on Thursday, midnight Thursday, off the east coast. So again, GWV is in agreement for this wave feature to develop through the course of Wednesday and probably produce some very wet weather across England and Wales on Wednesday. Through into Thursday and Friday, low pressure is sitting over the top of the country, so there'd be showers or longer spells of rain rotating around with that. Notice we've got a little bit of northern blocking reappearing around Greenland and Iceland up there. We go through into Sunday, a week away, and we try to build a little bit of pressure to our east, but it still looks pretty unsettled really, especially to the west. And then this low pressure starts to move back in as we go up towards day 10. This is Tuesday 23rd and on to Wednesday 24th. Low pressure is close to the country. Again, we have got northern blocking there around Greenland and Iceland. And I explained that in summer, what tends to happen with northern blocking, you have high pressure up there, you'll tend to get low pressure underneath it. And that's a classic example of why northern blocking is usually a pretty grim signal for the summer in the UK, because underneath the block you'll tend to get low pressure forming within the fairly warm, unstable atmosphere, and that can produce quite a bit of rain. So both of these models are looking really quite unsettled for the next week to 10 days. Finally, this is the 10-day accumulated precipitation chart from the weatheroutlook.com. This is based on the GFS, and well, it looks really unsettled. So most places, even the driest places, are getting between around 20 and 40 millimetres of rain in the next week. Some places are going up to 60 to 80 millimetres of rain, and you'll notice this quite alarming looking orange area around East Anglia, that's signalling around 100 to 120 millimetres of rain across the southeast of the country. That's probably over top. I would have thought that is overdone, but it does signal that we are heading into a much more unsettled period. So I think that is the message to take from the models. We've been in a long dry run, haven't had a proper wetter than average month since June, although November was a little bit wetter than average. But for a really wet month, you have to go back to June last year, and it could be that this dry spell is about to break, and it'll be a case, if it does break, it'll be a case of how long the wet spell goes on for, because sometimes after a prolonged dry run, it can flip the other way, and that would be very bad news for the summer. But it's a little bit too early to say that that's how things are going. It might just be an interruption, this, to the dry spell. So, for the time being anyway, much more unsettled, focusing on Wednesday for some really wet weather down in the south. Obviously, we'll be keeping you posted. Right, don't forget to check out the summer analogues if you haven't done that yet. And also, of course, we've got Terry Scully's final thoughts for the summer coming up later today. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.